Welcome to Agile in Toronto at Night, a badass Agile show. This week, I want to bring on Diane Dale. She's an Agile coach with perhaps the most interesting side hustle yet. But it's given her a unique insight into performance and team dynamics that most other coaches don't have. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Let's make some room for Diane Dale. Diane Dale, how are you?
I'm really good, Chris. How are you this evening?
I'm awesome. I wasn't sure if you were going to come.
Oh, well, I'm really glad I could make it. I was looking forward to the conversation.
Me too, but you said to me, and I think you were lying, that you're shy, which is not true. It's not true. I'm not buying it. Listen, come on in. The drinks are here. Why don't we just get comfortable? Grab your drink. Let me say cheers to you. I'm happy to see you.
Happy to see you. Cheers as well.
And I'm very, very glad you agreed to do this. Thank you. Now, first of all, tell me a little bit about what you've been up to. It's been like years since we sat down.
I know. It has been a couple of years at least. I think, really busy working, trying to just live what we call a normal life. And as we know, life completely went upside down on us about 3 months ago. So it's been a whole new world the last couple of months.
Are you remote now then, obviously, still working?
I am working remote. I'm fortunate enough to be able to keep working, and the family is happy and healthy, and we're pretty fortunate that way.
For sure. So everything really is perfect when you think about it.
Yeah.
Good.
It is. Pretty lucky.
So you know what I always liked about you that I was not expecting when we first met, because we met in like a banking environment. And I thought, okay, cool. Another Agile coach, another Scrum Master. I can't remember what we were doing at the time. And then we agreed to meet after our initial encounter, and I discovered something about you. And that something is you're a race car driver. Is that the right term to use?
Yeah, that is the right term. It's not, it's funny that you say that, because that's, I think, where my shyness comes in, because that's not something that I usually share with people that I work with, just because it's a different world and a different life. And sometimes you tend to keep them a little bit separate.
Do you know how I teased it out of you? You want to know what my secret is?
What was that?
Really cheap food court Thai food.
I think you're right. I remember that.
Yeah, it's not charm. A lot of people think it's charm. I say, no. No, you got to have some skills. You got to have conversational skills. You got to bring them to the right food court. But what's so cool about that we were trying to talk about parallels, and I'm fascinated with what you do, obviously, but we were talking about parallels to Agile, and I think you've latched onto something there, to be honest. I think you've come up with some parallels and similarities between what a racing team would look like and what an Agile team would look like, and some of their desirable behaviors. And I think in Agile, we so rarely talk about the qualities of the team. We talk about their roles, we talk about their ceremonies, we talk about maybe accountabilities and agreements, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about elite performance and high performance. So I would love to know what you've discovered and what you think are the talking points between race car driving and Agile teams.
It's funny, because when you and I started talking about it, it's something that has rung true to me in certainly the last couple of years. I think I found the parallels were unbelievable. Like the things that I was working with on my teams while I was coaching was the same sort of things that I was working on with the teams that I was racing with, and some of the same strategies and practices and things that we would try with coaching with delivery teams. I was doing the same thing with the race car teams that we were working with, and I thought, wow, what an interesting conversation for us to have, especially for somebody who understands the one context. And the one thing that I really liked about what you said was, a lot of the coaching starts out as, okay, let's talk about Scrum, let's talk about Kanban, how does that work for a team? But it so quickly gets into why it isn't working, and that is all about team dynamics.
Right.
And I think that I've found most of my coaching over the last probably 5 years is more about team dynamics than it is about the tactical approach or the practical pieces or elements of a Scrum framework or Kanban framework. It's more about how can we make the team more functional so that Kanban and Scrum works for them. And those are really the impediments, is how the team works together.
I tend to agree. It's never the tools, right? Like we got to stop talking about the tools. Now, here's one thing that I've seen over time is that people really struggle with, how do you become cross-functional? And so not only how do you become cross-functional, but how do you account for the different, orbiting disciplines like architecture, generally not in the team room, and have their own concerns across multiple projects. Then you have all the different types of programmers, front end, middle tier, back end. They don't necessarily fly in the same circles, but I'm thinking there may be something we can learn from racing, because you have the driver, but the driver is only the person with their hands on the wheel. They're by no means the entirety of the team. You have a mechanic, you have a driver coach, you have an event organizer, you've got people working in the pits, so how does team dynamics work across multiple different disciplines? What are the things that you do, or what are the challenges of orchestrating all those different talents?
Well, I think one of the ways that the whole collaboration and cross-functional component comes up within a team is, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the type of racing that I'm doing now, because there's different types of racing. There's, there's sprint racing, which is more individual, and it's one driver and it's a single race. It's probably 30 minutes long. So it's very much, okay, you're going to perform hard and you're going to perform fast, and you don't have a lot of time to recover if something should go wrong. The other type of racing that I've been doing for the last probably 5 or 6 years now is what we call endurance racing. So we have a team of 5 drivers plus mechanics plus some crew and some other things like that, where you're doing, on a weekend we'll do 2 9-hour races back to back. So one 9-hour race on Saturday, one on Sunday. Sometimes you do a 24-hour race. Sometimes you do a 14-hour race. It really depends on the configuration. But it is critical, as a team, that you're communicating and you're talking and you're being open and honest with each other. But on the other side of it, that you have lots of skills to bring to the table. Because, if you think about it, there's a couple of really great examples. It's like, if there's a key person risk and the only guy who knows how to change brakes is the driver who's in the car right now, and we got to change brakes on a pit stop, obviously you got a little bit of a problem there. So you find, as a team member, the more I can learn and the more skills that I have and the experience that I have and bring to the table, the more I can help out. Like, a lot of times we'll have to fix a car during a race. We'll have to fix a car overnight. Maybe the engine blew and we got to put it in the next morning. It doesn't matter who knows what, but we're all working together and we're all staying up all night to get that car back on track the next day. So the more skills you have and the more things you can do to contribute to getting that car to where it needs to be, so where that goal needs to be. And I think, in racing, we work together a lot, we partner a lot, we learn a lot from each other. I'm always wanting to learn more from somebody else and always looking over an experienced shoulder. Because, all those things that I want to contribute, if I'm not able to contribute, that I don't feel like I'm a good team member. And that's the exact same thing in software delivery. Like, if I can learn more skills, if I can have more cross-functional, maybe I don't know the detail of how to fix an engine, but I know how to change the oil. I know when it's clicking and it's making a funny noise and the rocker's broken or something is going wrong with it. So all those things that I learn benefit me when I'm helping the team and when we're trying to get to a goal.
Right. Now, there's a couple of things that are different between racing and agility. Right now in agility, safety is hot and freedom to fail is hot. But in racing, we don't have some of those parameters. We don't have those kinds of liberties. What we do have in racing is, I love the word victory. We don't use the word victory enough in Agile. What's wrong with saying if we nailed our sprint, we crushed it, we win? What's wrong with capital W win? And the other thing that you have in racing that maybe is different in Agile is real pressure. Like, hate to say it, if something goes wrong, people die.
Yeah, there's definitely that element of seriousness, right? That first of all, there is the safety element, and yeah, if you don't repair a car correctly, you can cause damage. There can be, the brake rotor can break, and the car can run off the track, or it doesn't stop properly and doesn't function properly. There's that other element too, though, that I like that idea of that win. Like, we know the common goal. We know that we're trying to win. We know, there's a strategy, and the strategy's hard. Just, do a perfect pit stop and do perfect laps, and you'll be fine. You'll win.
Yeah.
That sounds easy, doesn't it?
Just do that.
But we all understand the goal. So if something goes wrong during the day, we all can offer suggestions about how can we compensate for that? How can we get there? The other thing about it is our deadlines don't change. That green flag is going tomorrow morning at 9:00, whether we're there or not. So when, that whole idea of having a backlog of what do we have to fix? Well, yeah, we got 100 things we could fix on the race car, but guess what? Only 10 of them are our MVP, because those are the things we have to have in place. But we also don't want technical debt. We don't want to cut corners. We don't want to make things unsafe. So there's that similarity as well. What I find is missing is, it's funny, we'll spend weeks and weeks and maybe even months preparing a car. We'll go to a race, again, only one person is going to win the race. But when you're on the podium and you have a $2 trophy in your hand, it feels unbelievably incredible because of the team, because the team put in, and the best races that feel the best winning are the ones that you work the hardest and where things went wrong, but you overcame those challenges and you made it.
Yeah.
So why in software delivery don't we feel as good about reaching the finish line? Why do we not celebrate it just as much? And I think that's something that we could learn from racing and put that element into our software delivery. And I think, I have seen some teams who do that, and you can see those are the high functioning teams. Those are the ones who are proud of the work that they're doing, and they're proud of the efforts that they're putting into the contribution. They know what the goal is. They know, they collaborated together on an approach. They overcame the issues or problems that they were having, or, changes, things that came up that they weren't aware of. There's so much similarities with that. When we go to a race, we don't have a clue what the weather conditions are. We don't know what the track conditions are. We don't know what issues we're going to have with the car. You'll see the exact same thing with software delivery. We don't know. We put together a project plan. It's like, sure.
Yeah.
When have you ever seen a project plan go the way a project plan says it's supposed to go?
You mentioned something, and I'll pull back to it. You said that for some reason, software teams don't feel the same way when they hit a win, and we weren't sure why that was. Do you have an opinion on why that is?
Well, it's funny because I thought about that, and I thought, well, maybe it's not as, sexy or as exciting as a race car, being a race car driver and you're on the podium. But you know what? Nobody sees us on the podium. The kind of races that we go to, occasionally we'll do a race or as a support race where there are fans and things like that. Mm-hmm. But all of the racing we do at the amateur level, there's no fans. There's nobody there who sees you. It's internal.
Right.
It's that feeling that you had being together as a team because you went through some really hard times together.
Yeah.
And we were really vulnerable with each other, and maybe the software delivery teams, maybe we don't get that vulnerable at work. Maybe we don't get that involved with each other.
Right.
And maybe we don't feel the depth of the celebration then, or of the reward on the other side.
Or maybe we're not invested in the problems that we're solving. Is it possible, for example, that we're just not all that stoked about? Oh, I made a login module. Like, what if we took Agile? This is something I'm really big on right now, if you listen to the show, is where else can we put agility? Let's stop calling it Agile. Let's stop reading the manifesto like it only applies to software. What human problems could we fix? And when you start solving those problems that were previously immovable, where you have 12 other teams competing against you, then all of a sudden, a win means something.
Absolutely. And you can feel the difference. Like for you and I, we've been through the software game for a really long time, and you've been on different teams and you've experienced different teams, you can feel the difference.
Yes.
You can tell when people are in it because they love it and they're passionate about it and they care about it. And I think that's what you get in sports. So how can we translate that over to something on the software delivery side? Because I have been on teams in software delivery where people are stoked and they are excited and they are again sort of making themselves vulnerable and working really hard together. And those are the ones that feel great. Those are the ones that you're like, I want to go to work every day and I'm excited about going to work. And those are the ones that are very rewarding.
Do you feel like it's the ones where it's either an entrepreneurial culture or an entrepreneurial project or ambition or goal? Like more innovation, let's say.
I don't know. You'd think so. I think on the surface, but I think, I can think of projects that were, no offense to anybody out there, but are dull banking projects where I've had the best time because of the people I was working with. And again, because they made the environment every day feel like a podium, right? Like feel like that team, and it became, again, if you understood the goal and understood what you were really trying to achieve, and that was your passion, if you were really passionate about coding and about testing and about getting the delivery out the door, then that still could be functional, and that still could be in not, it's the environment is what you make it, I guess.
Sure. So you're saying willing minds and projects that fit. That's what I always like to say, meaning people who are stoked about what they do for a living because they love doing it, they love life, they love teams, they're going to make that project have a totally different feel.
Yeah, I think so. Because I would even suggest that there's been race teams that I've worked with where it hasn't been pleasant.
Right.
For the same dysfunctional reasons as work projects sometimes have not been pleasant.
Sure.
And the samples of those are, again, samples of dysfunction. There's an individual or someone on the team who doesn't buy into the collective goals, who's there for ego or status. Mm-hmm. You see that in racing all the time. There's a lot of egos in racing.
It's a sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but if you're doing it at an amateur level in the type of racing we're doing, you don't want to do it. You spend a lot of time doing it, and it's your hobby, it's your passion. You gravitate towards the teams that are functional. So why don't we do that at work as well? Why don't we keep seeking to find that?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I still feel like it. You mentioned vision. You mentioned your purpose. What are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? And I think when at the head somebody is really passionate about what we're building and they manage to communicate that in such a way that others catch on fire, that's another aspect too.
And that's a really big mindset shift I find with software delivery. I've worked with so many teams where they're in the depths and details of arguing about how to make something. And then you sit back and well, hold on a second, guys. So, sorry, why are you doing that? Why are you making that feature? Or why are you creating that thing? And they don't know. And you can tell right away that if they knew, perhaps what the customer was actually trying to do, what process they were doing outside of the software, and what goal they were trying to achieve, they'd probably have some great ideas. They'd probably still, you still want positive conflict. You still want them to have great ideas, but they'd probably align faster and, again, be more collaborative because they'd understand that what they were talking about is probably going to help them achieve that goal.
Yeah. I was on a government project once, and you would think government, but there was a moment where they released the first very small iteration of some functionality, and the customer was so overjoyed, as in, I can't believe I get to have this, because for so long we've been doing this by hand. I used to go to a ministry office and line up for hours, and it was a pain, and now I can just do it all online. Are you kidding me? And a lot of us looked at each other as though we had forgotten that there was a customer there. And when we saw that gratitude and we saw the impact that we were able to make, it changed the energy in the team permanently.
That was your podium.
Right, exactly. That's the podium. Now, here's another thing that I'm certain racing and Agile have in common, and that's pivot. So tell me about reacting to change, responding to change, because change in the racing world is catastrophic and instantaneous at times, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think, that's that whole thing about not understanding your elements. It's that whole concept that, I don't know, for some reason we keep thinking that we can change it, but we don't know anything about our environment, either in software and delivery or in racing, before we get there. We understand the parameters if we've done races before, if we've done software delivery before. We understand through experience what could happen, but we have no idea what will happen on this project.
Right.
So we can collaborate on a goal, and we can say, okay, how are we going to approach this, and how do we think this is going to work? And that's that whole idea of, don't spend a lot of time going into details and talking it out to the nth degree. Just start putting it together. In racing, I'm like, I don't know if this configuration of these brake pads and these rotors are going to give us the performance that we need for a 9-hour race. I don't know. Well, let's try it out. Let's start doing some testing. Let's get some data. Let's figure it out. Let's have the driver try it. Let's go do some test days. It's the same thing with software. It's like, let's try it out. And then guess what? We get to race day and it's raining. So the tires that we tested, the brakes that we tested with the rotors, everything changes. So again, if we have that idea of, we know what the goal is, what we know, we have experience in some other parameters, and in a few places we may have to try some new things, we have to be able to pivot. And you have to be able to be open about that. And you have to be able to say, you know what, that's not going to work, because we understood the conditions under which our experience worked in the past. We know the conditions are different. So now we're saying, okay, guys, let's talk this out. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is where we're at. What should we try next?
When you're mixing in audio, like you're mixing a song, a record, or you're mixing a podcast, you'll frequently start with an idea of how you want it to sound. And you know what tools get that job done. So you start playing with the tools. You turn some knobs. And a few tiny, I won't call them wrong decisions, but a few different things that are not quite the way you picture them, start adding up to something that you didn't really set out to achieve. So all of a sudden it sounds different than the way you thought it would. You have a choice. You can either stop, tear it all down, start over, or you can keep rolling with where it's going organically and see what comes out of it. And sometimes you end up with two drastically different products. But there's an art form to adapting to that new reality and saying, you know what, I'm going to let it go where it wants to go. Now, I have a question, though. You mentioned sensing when you change brake pads and rotor combinations, and then you get a feel, like the car will have a certain feel, and you say, that's the response I want. Does that mean that once you've done this enough times, you can pretty much sit down in any car and master it because you know what the car speaks to you? Like it's telling you things, and you know how to speak that language, so you know how to behave with it?
Yes and no. Obviously, the more experience you have and the more sensitive you are to listening to the conditions around you and listening to what's happening, you have to have that sense. You have to understand what's happening and be able to feel it. But every car is different, and even two cars that are the same may have different tendencies, or one's maybe out of alignment and the other's aligned differently, and so there's still infinite parameters of what you could be dealing with. But there are some core basics, and I would say that's the same to programming. There's some core basics that you have your skills with, but then there's a flavor you need to put on top of it depending on what conditions you're in or what environments you're in, right?
Well, I was actually leading you somewhere with that question. Let's talk about coaching, because every team is different. And even two teams that are same makeup, same people, because the challenge is different, may bring out different behaviors. You can change the room and things will change.
Absolutely.
So as a coach, what's your opinion on how technical you need to be? That is to say, how well you know all the moving parts, versus your instinct as a coach to say, a team is a team is a team, and there are certain skills I need to bring to bear. to guide these folks, but I don't have to understand everything that they do. I don't have to be a coder. I don't have to understand AI or RPA or whatever else I happen to be working in.
That's, the flavor for that question is interesting to me because, again, for the last couple of years, I've been working with a number of different coaches. And I think, from a work perspective and an agile delivery perspective, I've also worked with a lot of coaches on the racing side too. And I think there's another similarity there, which is there's different types of coaches for what you want to learn or what you want to get better at. So, I think it's critical to have a technical coach if you want to get your skills well defined and mature, in the sense of, can I write good code? Do I do unit testing? Do I do, have I got the basic principles down? Do I make my pipelines correct? Am I automating the right things? There's things like that from a technical perspective. Where are you using the tools efficiently and effectively? In the old days, we used to laugh because we get memory leaks all the time. Well, the good coders knew how to deal with memory leaks, right? I'm dating myself there, but I think the same is with coaching on the racing side too. You will have a fitness coach who helps keep the driver in shape. You will have, your mechanic, and you'll have somebody who specializes in coaching from an engineering perspective. We'll have somebody who, runs the data for the weekend and coaches you from a perspective. Here, this is what the data is telling you. And then you'll have a driver coach who's telling you how to deal with the conditions and looking at that data and telling you what where are areas you could improve and things like that, because they have experience under, those conditions with that kind of data and that sort of thing. And I'd say that's the same with coaching and delivery teams. Like, my technical expertise, I have a background in technical expertise, but obviously my more recent coaching is around team dynamics. So do I need to know, their coding pieces? To be a well-rounded coach, I think you need to have elements of everything, but I think we can then specialize. So as I get more advanced with a team and get deeper down to helping them, we help with the team dynamics, we help with the fundamental frameworks, and then we start getting into, okay, now we're running into technical challenges. Now we need to get a different style of coach. So I think there are, even if you look at the coaching models, they show the different backgrounds, right? So maybe you're someone on the product owner side or the business side who has more of that experience or that expertise versus someone who's a technical coder or can be more of a technical coach, versus a practitioner who's more agile, team dynamics and such.
I think there's so much good stuff going on in there. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, there's different kinds of coaches, as you say. And you mentioned a physical or an endurance coach. And if you think about it, the pressure that goes on a race day, the way you described it at the beginning, is not that different from the pressure teams feel on, like, when they're releasing software on a go to production day. And one of the things that we really haven't touched yet, but I feel like we might need to, is every agile project I've been on, someone cries at some point because there's so much change and it's stressful for people. They start out thinking, maybe I'm going to lose my job. There's been some where there's been fist fights because personalities get strong. We all are there for the same reason. We all want to win, but sometimes we don't feel heard. Sometimes we don't feel respected. We all come from different backgrounds. There was a lot of pressure in some of those rooms.
Absolutely. And there's a ton of pressure in racing, especially when things don't go well. There's a lot of egos and a lot of different personalities. And I think you'd see the same. That's human nature. You'd see the same in software delivery. I think one of the positive things we could take, and I've never experimented with this with a team, and I think maybe it is I find that most teams are forgiving when the push comes to the shove, meaning we have budgets and we have dates and timelines. But they really, when push comes to shove, most teams are like, oh, I can get another 3 months to deliver. Whereas in racing, we don't have that. And I wonder if some of the excitement and some of the collaboration is accentuated because we know we need to do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we forgive ourselves sometime. And I don't know that that's good, because you want your work to be sustainable. And, again, racing is a hobby and you don't do it every single day and you don't race every day. But on the other hand, why couldn't you fabricate that same almost a deadline or a pressure in a positive way, in some sustainable way, just to generate excitement and camaraderie? And I like to push people, for them to think of different ideas, to push them out of their comfort zone, to say, what else could you do?
Yeah.
And I wonder if ultimately some of the teams that I'm coaching, from a delivery perspective, they ultimately know that they can push something to next sprint. They ultimately know that they're not going to get in trouble.
Right.
Nobody really cares.
Right.
So why should they bother? Whereas I'm there, come on, no, we're trying to get this done by the end of the sprint. And I'm the only one who seems to care as a coach.
I was talking about this same thing to someone the other day. We get up in stand up and we say, yesterday I held myself accountable for this, and today I didn't get it done. And people are like, well, what's your blocker? Well, I have to get that diagram from Steve. Okay, well, where's Steve? Well, Steve's on vacation. Oh, for how long? For 2 weeks. Oh, so we're not going to get it done this sprint? We permit ourselves, you talk about giving yourselves liberties. I think that's one of the examples you might be referring to. But to answer your question directly, I believe that we can seriously up the quote unquote pressure as long as you do one thing. Let me answer by asking you this question. When you're driving, wheel falls off, brakes fail, something, you see flames someplace, what do you do?
Depends from what context. I mean, in one sense, the things that can happen is you can panic.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, your race is over, and it's about getting to safety, right? And at that point, so there might be some different analogies there.
So you probably, I'm guessing, have a protocol that you've rehearsed that if something goes wrong, you keep breathing, right? You have to stay focused. You have to say, okay, it is what it is. What I do next matters, because if I go sideways in a car going, I don't know how fast your cars go when you're racing right now.
It depends. It could be anywhere up to, we usually race probably 250 kilometers an hour.
At 250K, you have a lot less time to figure out that a car isn't where it was 2 seconds ago. It matters more if you go completely sideways, you go heading towards the side of the track. If someone doesn't have time to react, there's injuries. Cars are totaled, people are hurt. So the first thing you have to do, you must have a protocol for which way to steer if you don't have brakes, or if a tire blows, all of a sudden you have to adjust. Airplane pilots do this all the time.
Yeah,
There's been
absolutely.
people who have landed planes safely with no engines.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you teach people how to be present and understand what your body is trying to do in order to save your life, and then calm it down so that you can see, that you can then focus, and then recover, react properly, as the case may be, then those things are imminently survivable. And that's how you build up confidence on the track. Because if you get on the track thinking if anything goes wrong at 250K, we're all going to die, then you'll never put it in first gear.
Very true. And I think you build on that. You're right. You build on that experience, because once it's happened to you, once you've been in it's, typically when you're racing, it's not, if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen.
Right.
So once you've been through it a couple of times, if you're, fortunate enough that it's not too catastrophic, and most of the time it's not, then you're absolutely right. There's a protocol that happens, and that you go, I've been through this before. I know what to do. I know how to breathe. I know how I'm going to feel. I know how to react, right? And I know what to do, because that's the other thing is that, okay, because last time I forgot to turn the fuel pump off, and I forgot to, push the fire extinguisher when the fire started, or something silly like that.
Right.
But there is a protocol. There is, we call it egress. So basically we practice egressing, which is getting out of the car, things like that. But you also practice that mental state, right?
Yes. And I think if we taught more teams essentially the same skills, but without the 250 kilometer an hour car, you're basically saying, okay, when Steve's not here, what's the worst thing that could happen if we say, screw the diagram? Or I have the one from 6 weeks ago. It's probably about the same. Or I don't have a diagram, but I can imagine what would be on it. Let's make some assumptions and go, and let's have an egress plan if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. And I mean, the same thing happens when you're mid-race and something goes wrong with the car and you're not 100% sure what's wrong with the car. You're radioing back to the crew going, I think it's this, but I don't know what it is. And the crew's at the back saying, give me the data. What is happening? What do you see on your oil pressure? What do you see in your water temperature? What are you seeing here? And you're trying to figure what's wrong so the crew can be prepared.
Right.
It's like, is it the right front that's flat? Is it the left front that's flat? You got to figure that out, hopefully, so the crew can be prepared so that when you come in, they've got ideas. And they've been talking and they've been figuring it out and being prepared for as much as they can. So when they come in, they can hopefully fix it with the least amount of lost time, right?
You know what would be phenomenal? Because we do Agile games now where we build radio towers out of marshmallows and spaghetti. Why don't we take them out to the track? Let's get them out there, get the experience, get them to understand what real high performance teams look like.
That would actually be an interesting thing to set up.
The insurance would be crazy.
Well, I think there's something certainly as a pit crew you could do, and you could simulate different things occurring to the car. And okay, guys, figure it out. Here's the skills you have. Here's the tools you have. What are you going to do?
You got it. Because none of us are going to a track anytime soon anyway, I don't think.
No, it doesn't look like it. I think some of the tracks are starting to open up. Certainly the professional series have, but no spectators are going, and it's very cautious. And to be fair, right now to run those kind of sports, you need to have medical staff on site, and I would say for now they need a little bit of a break. And
they got better stuff to do.
Probably need to be somewhere else. Yeah,
that's a very good point. So when this is all over, Diane, what are you looking forward to getting back to here in Toronto?
That's a good question. I'm looking forward to seeing people again. I obviously, as the coach, we like to interact with people. We like to, especially when you're dealing with team dynamics, it's about observing how is the team interacting? What's the body language? What's the tone of the dialogue? That's difficult to do on Zoom, although still possible.
Right.
I've strangely found out that, I never thought you could coach remotely as well as you could, but it's also surprising to see how many people need coaching a little bit more now and how much you can help them. So I look forward to interacting with people again. That's really
Speaking of that, what do you like to do in the Agile community? Are there, you go to conferences? Are there meetups or groups that you go to?
Yeah, I do. I definitely have been to conferences. I went to one of the Agile Coach camps, the weekend camps.
Yeah.
Once there's so many different things available, like open space. I've been to a couple of those. There's so many different experiences. There's great courses to take. There's great meetups at night. A couple of the people had sort of broken off into, like, the community in Toronto is so large. Like, if you go to one of the standard Agile nights, sometimes I've seen over like 300 people show up.
Oh yeah.
So it's great that, and groups break off and form, hey, let's go for Friday lunches. For a while I was meeting up with a whole bunch of bank coaches, and things like that. So there's some I find there's a lot of fun stuff to gravitate to there.
And I want to say that the Toronto scene maybe is one of the best in the world, at least when I compare notes with other people. We just seem way more connected. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what makes Canadians or Torontonians that way, more community-based, even more giving.
It's funny because I actually worked in Stockholm for a while and for a couple of years, and I got to know some people there, and I felt they were also felt a little Canadian, and in a similar way, which is, at first we're a little bit shy and a little bit apprehensive, but once we get to know each other, we're friends, and we're friends for life. And I find that with the Agile community, you see a lot of the same faces again.
Yes.
And it's great because you start creating this little network, and then it's like, oh, I'm having this issue with this. I'm just going to ping that person on LinkedIn and say, hey, I was thinking about doing this. Do you have any thoughts? So even if it's somebody that you just casually met once, you can feel comfortable because we all have common networks, right? It's all either through LinkedIn or through, you're going to find the person. And people seem to be open to that communication. So at first it's a little rough, kind of breaking in. But once you're in, it's family.
You're in for life. It's kind of like the mob.
Yeah.
A little bit like that.
Hopefully without the detrimental endings.
Yeah, I hope so. But with all of the pizza.
Yes, definitely.
So I have a challenge for you. How can I get you out there doing more of what you just did, which is talking about your story, using your voice to help change the landscape of how we work as teams? I think it's so important. And I'll be straight with you. A lot of coaches don't have some of those experiences that you have. We like to hear about death-defying feats of superheroism, and you have a story to tell there, and you have lessons learned to bring back to the tribe. So how can I get you doing more of that?
That's an awesome question. I think we should explore that.
I think we should. I mean, I can always drag you, but not until this whole thing is over and I can actually take you to an event myself. But I really like the parallel that you drew between racing and agile teams and high performance teams, because a lot of people talk about high performance teams, but they've never actually been on one. And so I would love to find a way to work with you more often to get that done.
I think that would be fun, and I would love to invite you out to a race event sometime.
Oh, I'm going.
See it firsthand.
I am going, yeah. And if there's a way, if you tell me where to go and get myself into a car someday, I'm going to go try it. It's one of those things you got to do before you die. If you love cars, if you love speed, you're going to do it.
It's definitely adventure.
It is. Sure. And thank you for the inspiration, my friend. And thank you for spending time with me tonight. I'm glad you could be here. And I can't wait to do this again.
Well, I'd really like to thank you for the invitation, Chris. It was great.
My great pleasure. Stay well, stay safe, keep driving. I'll see you soon.
All right, take care.
So what did you think, guys? Listen, if you didn't take something away from that, you've been asleep at the wheel for the last 40 minutes. That's a fact. There's so many great bits of wisdom that you can take away and start thinking about bringing back to your teams. And I love the way she presents it all, too. It's just really well thought out. You know what? I'm looking forward to doing an Agile Pit Crew thing sometime in the future. So stay tuned for that. Meantime, guys, thank you for being listeners. I look forward to seeing you next time.